Have you ever walked into a room and immediately noticed that someone moved a picture frame by just a few inches? Or maybe you're the person who remembers exactly what someone was wearing during a conversation that happened 3 years ago. You catch the tiny pause before someone answers a question. You notice when a friend's smile doesn't quite reach their eyes. You remember little details everyone else seems to forget. And sometimes you wonder, why do I notice all of this when nobody else seems to? Most people assume it's simply because you're observant. Maybe you have good eyesight or a great memory. But psychology tells a much more fascinating story. The people who notice everything aren't just seeing more. Their brains are actually processing the world differently. They're constantly collecting information that other minds quietly filter out. And here's the strange part. This ability can feel like both a superpower and a burden at the same time. Think about your brain as a giant security system. Every second, your senses send millions of pieces of information to your mind. The texture of your clothes, the sound of distant traffic, the expression on someone's face, the temperature of the room, the smell of coffee nearby. If your brain paid equal attention to everything, you'd be overwhelmed within minutes. That's why the brain evolved a filtering system. It decides what's important and quietly ignores the rest. For most people, that filter is incredibly efficient. But for some people, it's different. Their mental filter lets far more information pass through. Instead of automatically dismissing small details, their minds keep collecting them like puzzle pieces. They notice tiny inconsistencies, a slight change in someone's tone, a missing object on a desk, the hesitation before someone says, "I'm fine." It's almost as if their brain refuses to stop gathering clues. Psychologists often connect this to something called high sensory processing sensitivity. Research by psychologist Elaine Aron suggests that some people naturally process experiences more deeply than others. They're not simply emotional. They're more aware of subtle information in their environment. Imagine two people watching the same movie. One follows the plot. The other notices the lighting, the background music, the actors breathing, the symbolism hidden in the scenery, and even the expressions of characters who aren't speaking. Both watch the same film. One simply noticed more layers. Life works the same way. You might be sitting in a cafe with friends while everyone enjoys the conversation. Meanwhile, your brain is quietly observing everything else. The waiter seems stressed today. A couple across the room looks like they're arguing without saying a word. The music changed from upbeat to slow. Someone left their umbrella behind. Nobody asked your brain to notice these things. It just does. This is one reason people who notice everything sometimes feel mentally exhausted. Their minds rarely get a break because they're constantly processing information that other people never consciously experience. Interestingly, this doesn't necessarily mean they have better memory. Instead, they often create richer memories. Memory isn't just about storing facts, it's about connecting details together. The more connections your brain creates, the easier it becomes to remember an experience later. That's why someone who notices everything might remember not only what happened during a conversation, but also where they were sitting, how the weather felt, what song was playing in the background, and how the other person's voice changed halfway through. The memory becomes a complete scene instead of a simple event. But here's where things become emotionally complicated. People who notice everything often notice emotional shifts before anyone says a word. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt that something was off? Nobody was arguing. Nobody looked angry. Yet somehow you knew. Sometimes you were right. Sometimes you weren't. This happens because your brain is constantly reading micro-expressions, body language, voice changes, posture, and countless tiny signals that happen beneath conscious awareness. Researchers studying facial expressions have found that humans can display emotional reactions lasting less than half a second. These tiny expressions often reveal feelings people are trying to hide. Most people miss them. Highly observant people often don't. This can make relationships feel incredibly rewarding because they understand others deeply. But it can also make relationships confusing. When you notice every little shift in someone's behavior, your brain naturally wants an explanation. They usually text faster. They sounded different today. They didn't laugh at that joke. They avoided eye contact. Suddenly your mind starts connecting dots. Sometimes those dots form an accurate picture. Sometimes they create anxiety. This is where observation quietly turns into overthinking. And the line between the two is much thinner than people realize. Imagine owning the world's most powerful microscope. It's fantastic for discovering details, but if you use it to look at every tiny crack in your relationships, eventually, every flaw starts looking enormous. That's one challenge people who notice everything often face. Their greatest strength can accidentally become their biggest source of stress. Another fascinating reason some people become highly observant comes from their past experiences. Children who grow up in unpredictable environments often become experts at reading subtle emotional signals. Maybe they learned to recognize the sound of footsteps before someone entered the room. Maybe they became skilled at detecting mood changes to avoid conflict. Maybe paying attention wasn't just useful, it felt necessary. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as hypervigilance. The brain learns that paying close attention increases safety. Years later, even after life becomes calm, that habit remains. Their brain continues scanning every environment, searching for clues. What's remarkable is that many adults don't even realize they're doing it. They simply believe everyone notices the same things. Then one day, they point out something obvious to them, and everyone else says, "Wait, I didn't even see that." That's when they realize their brain has been working differently all along. Of course, noticing everything isn't always connected to difficult experiences. Some personalities are naturally curious. Curiosity itself changes attention. When your mind genuinely wants to understand people, it begins collecting more information automatically. Think about detectives. Great detectives aren't smarter because they memorize every fact. They're curious enough to ask questions other people never think about. Their observations grow from genuine interest. Curious people often notice details because they're paying attention with purpose. This is why artists, writers, psychologists, designers, and musicians often describe themselves as constantly observing life. They're not trying to judge people. They're studying humanity. Every conversation becomes material. Every stranger becomes a story. Every tiny habit reveals personality. The world feels endlessly fascinating. But there's another side that rarely gets discussed. People who notice everything often feel misunderstood. Someone might say, "You're reading too much into it," or "You're overreacting." Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it isn't. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. Many observations are actually accurate. The problem isn't noticing. It's knowing which observations deserve your attention. Your brain wasn't designed to solve every mystery. Not every strange look has hidden meaning. Not every delayed reply is personal. Not every silence is rejection. Sometimes people are simply tired. Sometimes they're distracted. Sometimes life has nothing to do with you. Learning that distinction can completely change your emotional life. It's almost like driving at night. Your headlights illuminate only part of the road. If you constantly stare into the darkness looking for danger, you'll miss the beautiful journey happening right in front of you. Observation works the same way. The goal isn't to stop noticing. The goal is learning when to let observations pass without attaching stories to them. There's another beautiful gift hidden inside this personality: empathy. When you notice subtle emotions, you're often able to comfort people before they even ask. You remember birthdays others forget. You notice when someone suddenly becomes quiet. You recognize when someone's pretending to be okay. To the outside world, these actions seem small. To the person receiving them, they can mean everything. Sometimes the people who notice everything become the people who make others feel truly seen. And in today's distracted world, that's incredibly rare. Modern life trains our attention to become scattered. Phones buzz every few minutes. Notifications compete for every second of focus. Social media encourages quick reactions instead of deep observation. Yet people who naturally notice details remind us that paying attention is becoming a forgotten skill. The philosopher Simone Weil once wrote that attention is one of the purest forms of generosity. There's something powerful about that idea. When you genuinely notice another person, you're silently telling them, "You matter enough for me to see you." Perhaps that's why the most memorable people in our lives aren't always the loudest. They're often the ones who truly paid attention. So if you've spent your life wondering why you seem to notice everything while everyone else walks right past it, maybe there's nothing wrong with your brain. Maybe it's simply wired to observe more deeply. Yes, that means you'll sometimes overthink. You'll occasionally see patterns that aren't really there. You'll feel mentally tired after busy days because your mind has been collecting details non-stop. But you'll also experience moments that others completely miss. You'll appreciate beauty hidden in ordinary places. You'll understand people in ways that surprise them. You'll catch kindness, sadness, hope, and honesty in the smallest gestures. And that's a remarkable way to experience the world. The challenge isn't becoming less observant. It's becoming more compassionate toward your own mind. Trust what you notice, but don't let every observation become a conclusion. Sometimes the greatest wisdom isn't seeing more. It's knowing when enough has already been seen. So I'm curious, are you the kind of person who notices tiny details everyone else seems to miss? Or has someone in your life ever amazed you with how observant they are? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring the hidden psychology behind everyday human behavior, consider subscribing, because there are countless fascinating mysteries about the human mind still waiting to be uncovered.